let's talk about the tools that you're going to need to do this project. I have designed this project with absolute beginners in mind. Obviously, knowing how to safely use your tools is something you need to know and is your responsibility. I can't be there to make sure you're using your tools safely, so if you're not comfortable using a tool, then don't use it. But here's what you need, and this is the bare minimum. More tools obviously will make this job easier. You need a circular saw. With that circular saw, you'll want to have a straight edge. This is a scrap piece of plywood that I know is perfectly straight. You can buy aluminum straight edges at your local box store. And again, I designed this in mind with, you can get everything at your local box store, and if they have a panel saw there, they can cut most of the parts for you with the provided cut list. So you've got your circular saw, panel saw. You want a couple of clamps. These are just small F-style clamps. And again, in the corresponding build article, I will have links to every tool you need before you get going. That way you can decide if it's worth investing in the tools to build it yourself. And of course, you can also go to my website, Dailey Woodworks, and we will custom make one of these projector cutting tables for you, and we can ship it nationwide. So you have your circular saw, F-clamps, straight edge. Next thing you'll want is a cordless drill of some kind. Any brand will work. With that cordless drill, you're going to need a Phillips head screwdriver bit and an 1/8" drill bit. To pair with your drill and drill bit, you're going to want 1¼ and 1½ or 1 5/8 wood screws. Again, links to everything will be in the corresponding build article and in the plans that you can purchase. You'll want a tape measure, and then you'll want a framing square. This is a large framing square to help make sure you cut everything at 90 degrees. It is very, very important that you cut everything at 90 degrees so you have a nice flat work area. Then you'll also want a smaller square of some kind. This is known as a speed square, and this is basically a shrunk down version of it that I keep in my pocket. Then you'll want wood glue, a sander or just sandpaper if you want to hand sand it, and then whatever paint or finish that you choose to put on it. Alright, we're ready to start cutting our 3/4 inch sheet of plywood. Again, you can use your straight edge and run your circular saw against it. I'm going to use my track saw because that's what I have and that's going to give me the best quality cut. Your local box store should have a panel saw. Probably will have a panel saw whether you go to the orange one or blue one or green one, whichever one you have in your area. I have done everything I can to make this cut list panel saw friendly. I can't guarantee the worker that's going to cut your stuff is going to be able to do that, but I've done everything I can to make it easy to do so. If you're doing this at home, the first thing you want to do is make sure you have a good 90-degree corner to reference from. So I've taken the effort to square it up, but your plywood should come relatively square. So on your long edge, make sure that everything is, and then whenever you put your framing square on it, there should be no gaps anywhere. If you do have a gap, then you basically need to create a square edge. So you can take it, make sure you're referenced, and hold it in place, and then with your pencil, mark your edge, and then extend that line up with your straight edge, and then cut it with your circular saw to square it up. The first thing we're going to do is cut our top. So I'm going to measure over, and again, all the dimensions are in the cut list provided in the set of plans. So I'm going to measure over. On one spot right here, and then I'm going to come up to the top over here and measure the same distance. And by keeping everything parallel, we know we're going to get a nice square cut. Now I can take my straight edge whether that's a track saw, an aluminum straight edge, or a wood straight edge. I'm going to line it up with the kerf of my saw blade. So I'm going to set that right there. And now I know that whenever I cut this, I'll be square on this edge. These three sides will all be square. And then I'll cut this final edge to size. One of the many uses of clamps throughout this project is to clamp down your straight edge so it doesn't move when you're cutting it. So I'm going to make sure I'm on my pencil mark and clamp that into place so it's not going to move on me. Because again, we want this whole project to be as square as possible so we have a nice flat surface to cut on and project onto. Alright, we have everything laid out and referenced. I want to make sure that I put a little star right here on my reference corner. That way I'm always measuring everything off the same spot. Now we're ready to cut our top to its final size. So again, I'm going to measure over here and here to make sure everything's staying parallel. And it's a good idea to go ahead and check. Make sure that everything is still nice and square. And we're perfectly square right now. Okay, our top is done. We want to put this somewhere safe so nothing happens to it. And then we're going to go ahead and label it as our top. Now doing the same thing, we're going to cut the wing for the projector. Same principle is we're going to measure from both ends. We're going to have a little under 2 inches of waste material. Okay. Make sure everything's nice and parallel. Again, I'm checking square just to make sure that everything is going to be how we need it to be, and we're still perfect, so that's good. If your spouse or significant other is an avid woodworker, I would highly recommend getting them a track saw of some kind. This is the Makita track saw. It is by far one of the most useful tools I've ever purchased. And since you're getting a nice cutting table for your projector out of the deal, maybe getting him his own track saw would be a nice exchange of goods and services. And with that cut, our top and our extension wings are done. Here's what I mean by marking your corner. This is my reference edge for everything. So as I rotate this around, I'm making sure I always measure from this corner, and this is my keep. So this is what on my keep side, everything else is the offcut. So you can see my cut list is here, and this is how this piece lines up right now. So now I'm going to rotate it like this, and then I'm going to cut the pink and then the blue, and these are going to be my two sides right here, and this is going to be my center cubbies. Alright, so we have this here, we have our width correct, so I'm going to go ahead and write side on this. I'm going to write side here, that way I can make sure I label it in the plans. Side, side, then we're going to measure over, mark our line, come up to the other corner and mark the line. By doing this, we make sure we're staying parallel. And if we're square as we measure, then our lines, when we do parallel lines, we'll end up with a square rectangle, which is what we want. Now again, this is part of I have tools you don't. If you're doing this with your straight edge, you want to get it clamped down like you have before, and cut it, but because I have this with a square built into it, I can line up right there, and I'm on my lines like I'm supposed to be, and now I can go ahead and cut this. Alright, so this part right here is done. But if you've noticed, on this piece I no longer have my star. But if I transfer everything over by staying parallel with this line and staying parallel with this line, this is my new reference corner. So I'm going to go ahead and put a star right there as well. This piece I can go ahead and set completely out of the way. Now I'm going to double check my measurements again. Same thing we've been doing this entire time, starting from our reference corner. Gonna come over, check our measurements. In this case it's 11 inches. Measure at the bottom, then measure at the top. Double check. Put our fence on, and then we're ready to just go ahead and cut. And this piece right here is just waste. However, with the waste pieces, I just realized there might be enough to go ahead and make your projector stand out of it. I'll have to check that later on, but if there is, then I'll just roll it all together as a package deal. And so this is our blue divider, our blue cubby. So I'll put cubby there. Okay. I'll go set this down, and now we'll do the other one exactly the same way. Now we are moving on to the second page of our cut list. I have it laid out here. This one's a little bit different, but what I'm going to do, because of how I need to cut the material, is I'm actually going to rip it this way first and then go back and cut it crossways. And according to my directions, that measurement is 37 inches. So again, starting from my straight edge, I'm going to measure over 38 inches. Wait, no, 37 inches. Always double check your measurements because you might mess up. And then down here, I'm going to do exactly the same thing. And then I'm going to align my straight edge with my pencil marks. Making sure I get right on my pencil mark. This is scrap for right now, but we are going to use this again. So what we have now are two parallel edges, but what we need is this to be 90 degrees. So what we've got to do is square that off. So we're going to use our framing square and line it up with our straight edge. Once we get in place, we'll just grab our line. You have plenty of room, so if you end up cutting off about a 1/2 inch, no problem at all. So again, I'm cheating a little bit, and I'm going to use my track saw straight edge that has an attachable square accessory, so I can go ahead and square this up. But same principle applies. You just line it up with your straight line, your 90-degree corner, and then we're just going to trim off that edge, and then we're going to put our star right here on this corner for our reference. And just to check, I know that's 90 degrees, and then I'll check this to make sure it's 90 degrees. And it's perfect. So that is exactly what we need. And now we can move on. I'm going to put my star right here in the corner for my reference area. And because this is 90 degrees as well, I can go ahead and put one right there. Alright, what these parts are in green on our cut list are the bottom, middle shelf, and then top support for our cutting table. We have everything squared off. Now we're just going to measure over and cut this 3 times. So again, let's double check, make sure we have a square edge. So I can use this square right here on my framing square, and we're perfect. So we're good. And my measurement is 24.5 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and measure over. Put my mark. And we're ready to cut. Again, if you're having to clamp a straight edge on and doesn't have a built-in square, you want to measure from both edges and make sure you stay parallel. So that's one. Again, we're going to put our star back on there. Measure over. Measure at the top. Put our straight edge in place, clamp it if necessary. And we'll need to do this one more time. Alright, now we're moving on to probably what's going to be one of the more complicated cuts on this build. If you're having your panel saw guy do this, you can just make this a rectangle. Let me show you what we're doing. See these kind of orange brownish guys right here? You can see the dotted line I'm putting on right here. You can just cut these to be perfect squares. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no reason you can't use them like that. The angle is purely for a clearance issue and purely kind of just to make it look a little bit lighter. Not necessary. So again, we're going to start with our corner and our corner. I'm going to go ahead and mark that. My first one, I'm going to come over 13 3/4, and I'm going to cut that. we have this. It's the width we need. Now we need to cut it to length. So now I'm going to take this and I'm going to rotate it like that. I know this is square because I'm using my square to make sure I'm staying that way the entire way. Now I'm going to measure over 16 inches. And again, if we're using our framing square to do this, we can just come over here, line it up with our edge, make sure we're nice and lined up, mark our line. It'll work exactly the same on this side as well. See, our line lines up. That's what we want. Okay, so now we have our piece. This is all you need. You can stop right here. But just for decorative purposes, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to measure 3 inches. Measuring 3 inches. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to measure 3 inches. I'm going to take my small square, line up with my 3-inch line, go ahead and mark that, line up with my 3-inch line, and go ahead and mark that. Now what I'm going to do is at the edge of each of these, I'm going to remove my guide rail square. Now all I have to do is put my straight edge on those 2 lines right there. Make sure I'm supported underneath my cut. And now I have my wing, and this is going to be for the fold down part. This is going to fold into the cutting table, and then the leaf will drop in over it, and then when you go to set it up, you'll just fold it out. And that just gives it a nice little detail. Now I'm going to do the other one exactly the same way. We're now ready to make our last cut on our second page of our cut list. And that is these gray boards right here that are 3.5 inches. This is a little bit of a complicated cut. However, you can easily just buy some 1x4s or something like that and then cut them to length and you'll be fine. So I'm going to show you 2 ways to do this. I need this to be 3.5 inches, approximately. It doesn't have to be 100% accurate on this one. And what these are primarily for are to give the wheels, our caster, something to bite into. So we're going to measure over from our clean straight edge 3.5 inches. Okay? Then I'm going to come over here. Then I'm going to measure over 3.5 inches. And now we're going to line up our straight edge. With our marks. Now, if you've done woodworking before, you'll know that we're going to be cutting on the off side, so we're going to eat up our kerf, and it's not going to be perfectly 3.5 inches. On this cut, it doesn't matter. If you have a table saw, use that for this cut. If you want to flip it around the other way, you can do that, but I don't advise it because you don't have any support over here, so you'd have to put a support board underneath somehow, but you can quite easily use some of your scraps and place your scrap under the off side of your straight edge, or your track saw and support it this way, and that way we can make sure we get an accurate cut. So in fact, that's what we're going to do here, is we're going to use our scrap boards to make sure we're getting an accurate cut, and we're cutting on the keep side of our board. There we go. And now we are ready to make our cut. Okay, this board right here is scrap. This is a great opportunity to show you how to safely cut with a circular saw. So I'm going to measure over and mark my line. I'm going to mark an X on my waist side, and I'm going to use my square to mark my line. Now, I'm going to take my square and reference it on the back of my board, and then I can clamp with my hand right there. And you can see my board is fully supported, so I'm not worried about it falling. Here, with my saw, I've got to slide this over to make sure my 0 is aligned with my line. So I've got that right there. Now, I can cut right through and get a perfect cut the length I need it to be. So that's how you make a safe cut with a circular saw. I'll do it one more time so you can see it. We're going to measure over 37, make our mark, and come with our square, scribe the line. Then we're going to come over right here, make sure we're aligned on our 0 on our circular saw, make sure our square is held, and what I'm doing is I'm resting the plate of the saw against the square right here, and that acts as my tracker, straight edge. And every circular saw is different. In this plate, the plate is exactly 5 inches, which is a great measurement of just add 5 inches, and then I'm able to reference everything off of that. So you can see how even without a track saw, you can still use a circular saw to get a lot of stuff done. We are now ready to start our assembly process. We're going to start with the bottom and work our way to the top. So what I always recommend doing is, on a lot of plywood you'll have one side that looks better than the other, or is smoother than the other, or whatever. This is pretty much the same, so it doesn't matter. So I'm going to be looking at the bottom, and I'm going to mount my cleats for my casters. So all we're going to do here is line it up with the edge. We're going to line it up with the edge, make sure it's smooth with the edges, and then we're just going to screw this down. Wood glue is your friend here. Wood glue is what's going to give this its max strength. So now I'm just going to spread a bead of glue. Here, I'll mark a pencil line at the edge of my board so I know where my board stops. And I'm going to put some glue on here. And just set that on here. Wiggle it around a little bit to kind of spread that glue out. And then the little clamps I told you you needed earlier are perfect for right here, of just clamping it down so it's not going to move on us while we screw it in. So I'll put that right there. So I know my caster is going to go here, so I'm not going to put any screws there to keep it free. So I'm just going to drill a little diagonal, zigzagging series of holes. And I can almost guarantee you that this is way overkill. Now the next thing I'm going to use this little bit right here. This is a countersink bit. You can buy drill bits with these two things in one setup. I've misplaced mine, so I'm going to use this. And what this does is it creates a little countersink. I'm going to show you. Like that. So this way your screw head, which is right here, and your drill will have like a chuck on it of some kind that will control the torque. And if you listen, it'll beep at me once it's tight. So that's all you got to do. Make sure the screw is below flush. I over drilled that right there. And that just makes sure you have a nice fit for everything. So I'm going to do this all the way down and screw this one on and do the same thing for the other side. And I'm using 1¼ inch screws here. That's too much. So that one I did right, and it's perfectly flush with the edge. That way, whenever it's time to paint this, a little bit of wood filler, and it'll be perfectly invisible. Alright, now we're going to do this other side exactly the same way. Now that we have our bottom cleats mounted for our casters, we can flip this over. This is a good part to mention that if you need this taller than 32 inches the plans call for, you can use some scrap blocks right here to add spacing for your casters, or you can use larger casters. So if you used 4-inch casters, that would get you to 33 inches. You could then add 3/4 of an inch here, or a 1/2 inch, or double it up, or even triple it up to get that to the height that you need it to be comfortable at. So it's very easy to adjust the height on this. So now we flip it over. Now we're looking at this the right way. Now we're going to put our dividers here in the middle. We're using these 3/4 inch dividers right here that are going to sit like this. So now we've got to do this math. Alright. So now I have my two pieces stacked up here. Now I'm going to measure that. It's going to butt up against it. I'm at 35 9/16. I have a little map, or a little app on my phone that will get me the how to split this where it's all even. And then of course in the plans I'll have this exact measurement. It's just I wanted to build it before just trusting my model and correct anything I needed as I'm building it so that your plans are dead on. So I've done all the math and the spacing is 11 13/16. That will get our dividers even all the way down. So now I'm going to use our framing square. Reference it on my marks that I've measured out. There we go. And then scribe a line. And I'm going to draw out my lines all the way down. Once again, I'm going to cheat a little bit with my track saw and its built-in square because it's just a little bit easier to lay out and scribe my line. Okay. Alright, got everything scribed right there. Now I'm going to do my other piece that's going to match this. So this is my second of 3 of the green shelf parts. I'm going to line it up right here. And then I can just make a little tick mark. Make a little tick mark like this. A little tick mark like that. And a little tick mark like that, little V's. There we go. And now, using my small square, I can just wrap those lines around. So I'm just going to take this, line it up with the edge, transfer the line, and then I'll do the same with this other one right here. Transfer that line around. Now we need to attach these like this. And we're going to screw it from the underside. So we're going to screw it like this. However, we need to make sure we get our holes in the right spot. So I'm going to show you a trick for doing that. We have our lines for where this is going to sit. And it's easy enough to eyeball our center point. So I'm going to just eyeball it. I'm going to put 4 little dots about evenly spaced. And I know I've got my mounting cleat here, so I've got to avoid that. So I've got my dots right there. Now I'm going to drill through here, and then I'll put my hole in the back side, and that way it'll be easy to make sure I'm getting this lined up. So now that we have everything pre-drilled, we can flip it over to the back side, and I can see all of my screw holes there. I'm going to go ahead and switch back to my countersink. That hole is kind of too close to the edge, so I'm going to have to re-drill it. It's not a problem because you're never actually going to see this hole when all said and done. So I'll put that right here. There we go. We have this ready to screw together now. So I'm going to set it like this. I'm going to take this leg right here, and I'm going to line it up, and I'm going to put glue on it. But what I really need to do is I need a way to clamp this. So let me show you how I'm going to clamp this, and I'll give you a great little accessory tool that's worth buying. Once we stand this up, we now have to make sure this stays aligned. Alignment is very important. We want to keep it on our line. But we've also got to hold it in place, which can be difficult. This little square is called the Oscar square. I bought it from a company called FastCap. It's very useful. I'll put a link for it in the plans. You don't have to have this, but it's definitely a useful accessory. I'm pairing it with some spring clamps, which are these guys right here. And the way this works is you set it down, and then you just put your little spring clamp on here, or your other F-style clamps will work on this as well. Get it positioned how you want it, and now this will give you your extra set of hands for getting this aligned how you need it. And this one doesn't open up. Oh yeah, it does. Okay. So that is what you need there to get this guy installed. Again, very, very, very important that you use glue here. Alright, for this application, I'm going to be using my 1 and 5/8" screws. This is going to give me a bigger bite into my material and give me that little bit of extra strength that I want. So here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to go ahead and take this guy off, and then I'm going to run a bead of glue all the way down. Alright, I'm going to run my bead of glue. Then I'm going to stick this back into place. Having a flat workbench is very, very helpful at this point in the build. Alright, clamp that together, push it together how it's supposed to be. Make sure everything's adjusted and fine-tuned. Alright, I like that. Now, what I'm going to do is I want to pre-drill my plywood so it doesn't split. So I'm going to put my drill bit back on, come back in my hole that's already there. I'm just going to drill one hole. The reason I'm only drilling one is because if I start drilling others and I have to shift it around a little bit, my holes won't line up. So I have that. And now I'll come back here and just drive this one screw in. Make sure I'm aligned. There we go. That's good. Now I'm going to repeat the process. See, I had to shift it over just a smidge to make sure I'm on my line, and you can see right here I'm on my line. So now I'm going to go down to the bottom one. Same thing. There we go. And now that I have my top and bottom, it's not going to move around on me. I can pre-drill my other two holes at the same time. There we go. Now our first part of our cubby is done. And these are all the way through cubbies. If you wanted to, you could very easily come in with some of your scrap plywood and just fill in that gap with a cubby and have it divided. We talked about it and my wife wanted them to go all the way through. She thought that was going to work better in her space. So that's what she got. Okay, this is done. I'm going to repeat the same thing on this other side, and then I'll show you how to sandwich it all together. Now we're ready to start assembling our sides. We've already got everything cut. Again, if you need to make this taller for you, you can cut these side panels longer, or you can just add bracing for the casters, go bigger casters. There's lots of ways to adjust the height on this. So we're going to take our side panel and push it in place. And what you need to do is on the bottom side right here, you see how this overhangs a little bit for the feet? You can also do like that if you wanted to make it a little bit taller. Or you can do like that. So that's one way to give yourself an extra 3/4 of an inch of height if you want. I've designed it where it's flush here because that gives it a little bit more meat to attach to. Alright, so now I'm going to take this, set it off to the side. And then come in and I'm going to go ahead and add my glue to the edges. And I'm going to go ahead and put glue on this little section right here as well, just to give myself that extra support that I want. Okay? So, coming in with my side piece right here. Gonna make sure I'm aligning with this back corner. Make sure it's flush. Make sure we're flush. Alright, and then same thing as before, except this time I am going to use my little right angle clamp to kind of hold this for me, give me that extra set of hands. You can use your framing square and clamp it on there if you're careful. That's one way to do it. This is just a very inexpensive tool that is very beneficial for assembly jobs. Like we've done the last few times, we are going to use our drill bit and we're going to pre-drill everything. So I am just going to go right into here to my cleat in the middle because that's not going to hit a screw. Depending on your square, this one has a little 3/8 inch offset, which is half of 3/4, so I can just kind of mark a line right there so I know where to drill. So I'm going to go ahead and drill those 2 holes about center, and then about center right here. Oops. And that's why I should have driven this screw before I did that bottom hole. That was a mistake on my part. I'm going to go ahead and do my countersink. And then I'm using my 1 5/8 inch screws again here. It's 1. 2. So now I know that I also have a full plate all the way down that's going to be 1.5 inches thick. So if I look, 1 1.125 is about my center point. I'm going to go ahead and scribe a line at 1 1/8 with my square. Go all the way down with that. Double check that 1 1/8 is where I want it to be. Yep, so that's good. And so now I'm going to switch my drill bits again. I've already got 2 in here, so I know that I can just drill everything out. It's going to hold it aligned for me. Now I'm going to move my right angle to right here. Pull that tight together. Okay. Now what I didn't do was scribe my line. So again, I'm going to use my framing square, and I'm just going to, with this square, I'm going to eyeball kind of the center of my board. And then I'm going to go ahead and transfer that down like that. That's the center line for where I need to drill up my holes. Now I'm going to take my framing square, line it up with my edge. Right there. And then scribe a line all the way down. And that's where I'm going to drill my holes. Now these screw holes will be visible, so you'll want to plug them in some way. If you have a nail gun, you could just shoot it with a nail gun. If you have a pocket hole jig, you could do your pocket holes from the inside. That way they would not be visible. But I'm trying to do this particular build for minimal tools, so we're just gonna drill this out like we did last time. And then when we're done, we can kind of trim it out, make it pretty. Kind of an advanced step, or just plug it with some wood filler and then paint it. I'm going to make my countersink a little bit deeper so I can make sure I get my screws below flush. That'll make it a little bit easier on me when it comes time to paint. And of course, once you have glued and screwed this together, it's not coming apart. So if you need this to disassemble, then skip the glue and just screw it and leave your screw heads visible, but then you're not going to have the strength that glue adds. Again, I'm using the longer 1 5/8" screws. Gives us that bite that we want. And if you're an advanced woodworker, just know that you can use the advanced methods. If I was making this my normal way or to sell, I'd probably have this all with rabbets and dados. I would be using Festool dominoes, different things like that that do give a higher quality finish. But I've done enough building with unfinished plywood and screws and glue that this is going to be plenty strong for many, 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 many years. So there's nothing wrong with this. It's just not as pretty all said and done. Alright, so now we have this side done. Now we need to do the exact same thing on this other side. Now we're adding our third support. The reason I'm adding this is to essentially double up on the top, which is going to make it more sturdy and give it a little bit more strength. On the first version of this I built for my wife many, many years ago, I just set the top on top of this and it kind of sagged over time, and you don't want that with your projector. So this fits in here nice and snug like it should. That's why it's very important to cut everything the same and everything consistently. So that's going to fit in here like this, and we're going to screw it again with 1 5/8" screws. So the first thing I'm going to do is put glue on everything. I'm going to put glue on this edge. And then I'm going to put glue on this edge. And then we're just going to kind of squeeze this into place. There we go. Right there is what we want. Flush on the bottom, flush on the top. If you need it, you can use your little clamps, but I'm good right there. So same process, I'm going to drill out just my top hole in about the center of my board. I'm going to use this little 3/8 inch offset that I have on my square. Some squares have this, some squares don't. I will link to this one, of course, in the tools available. You don't have to have this though, it's just a nice little luxury tool. So that puts my screw locations where I need them to be. So now I'm going to pre-drill. I'm going to switch out to my little countersink. I'm making sure this is flush right here at the top. There we go. That's in there. So now I'm going to do the same thing. And it's very important we get this flush because that's going to help it be flat. So if there's a little bit of curve, I'm actually just going to work down this time because this has a little bit of a bow in it, and I'm going to pull that out in just a minute. So I'm going to make sure it's flush at my second screw location, which is going to be right here. I'm just going to mark it with my drill real quick. And then swap everything out. Okay. There we go. Alright, now I'm going to check down here. A wet rag is great for getting glue squeeze out off. Make sure I'm flush, make sure I'm flush. So I'm going to go right about here next. So I'm having 4 all the way down. Not even worrying about this other side right this second. But I do need to work quickly so my glue doesn't set up on me. So I'm going to go ahead and do this one about right here. Make sure it's flush. That's good. Countersink. Inch and 5/8 screw. And if you looked carefully, you saw some of the glue squeezed out when it clamped itself together, which is what we want. So I've got like a tiny little lip right here that I need to get fixed. So I'm going to get my drill bit back in place, and I'm going to push this flush with my finger, then very carefully drill it out, making sure I'm keeping my fingers clear of anywhere that drill bit could possibly be. There we go. Then whenever I go to drive my screw, make sure it's flush, pulled nice and tight, and it's nice and flush. Now we're going to repeat this process on the other side. And here we are. This is the body of our cutting table. All we really need to do now is attach the top. We're going to do that later because now we need to add our bracing for the fold out wing. That's going to be made from 1/2-inch plywood. So now we're going to switch gears, move to our 1/2-inch sheet of plywood, and start breaking that down. Here's what's going to happen there is I'm going to cut the piece I need for this out of that 1/2-inch sheet of plywood, and then finish this, and then I'm going to do a separate video on how to build basic drawers, just that way, because this one's getting a little bit long. That way you can get the gist of this, and then you can watch that second video on how to make the drawers for this specific project. Super simple, basic 1/2-inch plywood drawers that you don't need any special tools to make. You can do it all with just your circular saw and straight edge like we've done this entire project. Alright, so this is good. Now we need to cut that little back square, so you need to pick whatever's going to be your front and back. It doesn't matter, it's universal. And that's going to give us our mounting location for our wings and our fold out wing. And then we'll get all of that built out and show you how to dial that in. And then this will be ready to paint however you choose to paint it. Alright, we're now breaking down our 1/2-inch plywood. We need 1 sheet of this. Now, I have our cut list here, and I have done everything in my power possible to make this panel saw friendly, so your guy at your box store can break this down for you. But also make sure you're showing them a little bit of grace. They've probably had 20-30 minutes training on it top, so this isn't going to be something intuitive for them. Maybe, maybe not. But if they mess up a cut, whatever, show them some grace, get another piece of plywood and move on, okay? Alright, so we're going to do the same thing we've done in the past. We're going to make sure that we have our square corner marked over, and then we're going to start working down our cut list, cutting this piece of plywood into sections. So we've already made sure that we've got a nice square edge with that, and we've got a star on it so we'll know what we're referencing over. So now I'm going to measure over 37 inches. Then I'm going to come over to the other side. And I'm going to measure over 37 inches. Now I'm going to make sure my track is lined up with those two spots. And then I'm going to use my clamps to clamp it down. You do the same principle with your straight edge if you're just using a straight edge and a circular saw. So that's 1. So I'm going to go ahead and label this as sections 1, 2, and 3. And then I'll put a 1 right here. And then go ahead and get this unclamped. Then I'll just move over to my next section, rip that to 36 per my instructions. And again, I'm going to mark my corner that I know that right there, that's my square edge. That's where my reference is for later on. So this is going to be 36. So I'm going to use this and I'm going to measure twice to get a parallel. 36. And then 36. According to my cut list, this one should be 22. And I've got about 5/8 of an inch of material extra, so that laid out pretty tight. 22 inches, 22 inches. I'll lay it like that. It'll be a little bit easier for me to cut. I don't have to stretch as far. That lined up right there. That lined up. And then this is section 3, and then our square point right there. Now we're going to pull section 1 back on here and break it down the rest of the way. Go. So I've reoriented this where my square corner is right here. And now I need to rip from here 22 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to flip it like this. And then I'm going to rotate my sheet like that so I'm looking at it the right way. That's my square edge. I need that to be 22 inches. And what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to go ahead and fold this. So I'm only looking at what I need to be looking at. Okay, so 22 inches. Right there. That square, now I can rotate this because I know that these two corners are now square to each other. I'm going to put in a star there. And then I need to cut that 36 to be its final size. So 36. And this is going to be one of our drawer bottoms. Okay, so that's going to get a check, and this is going to be a DB for drawer bottom. Alright, so now we have this. We know this should be 37 inches. There it is. And now we need to make that 13 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it like this. That's my star. And then I can measure over 13 inches. Actually, according to my actual measurements, that needs to go to 13 and 3/16. Actually, 13 and about an 1/8 and a half. So let me remeasure. So we have that, and that's why your plans will have this corrected measurement. So I'm going to split that 1/16 right there. What I'm doing now is I'm cutting what's going to be our panel that's going to fit inside for the back of our cabinet. And this is going to give it strength as well as a place to mount our piano hinges for the folding table mechanism. Alright, this is going to be for our drawer side, so I'm going to do DS. And this is going to be cabinet back, so I'm going to do CB. Now I'm going to show you how to install this one, and then we'll move on to building our drawers completely in the next video. Alright, here we are with the cabinet back. Again, right now there's no front or back to this, there's just how it is. So it fits in. It's tight, it's snug, that's what we want. And a little mallet like this will eventually help us get this into place. There it goes. Glue would be better for this, but it's going to be so hard to get glue in here that we can actually skip it because of how tight this fits in here. For this, it's very much love taps until you're getting it flush all the way around. If this inside is bowed in or out a little bit, you can fix that later on. It's not that big a deal. But these edges right here, you want to be flush. So we're flush right here. Again, I'm using my cool little square. It has a 1/4 inch offset as well, so I can mark my 1/4 inch. And then I know if I drill into that, I'm going to hit the center of my plywood. Alright, so same process as before. I'm going to make sure I'm staying on my line, make sure I'm flush, and I'm going to go ahead and drill out one hole. There we go. Right there. Now for this, because 1/2 inch plywood will start splitting if you drive a screw too far into it, I'm going to use my 1 inch and 1/4 inch screws. So same screw, just shorter. And what that'll do is it just won't go as deep into the plywood, but will give it enough purchase to hold. And what this does is this holds it square. The strength comes from how it's sitting in there. So drive that right there, and then I'll make sure this is flush. Do that second one. It actually needs to come out just a smidge. There we go. That's flush right there. You can definitely trust your fingertips. Will tell you if there's a lip there or not. Alright, so I'm going to do another screw location about right there. Okay. When I go to the store later, I'm going to see if I can find a combination countersink drill bit so I can do that in one step, because this is taking a while. 1 1/4 inch. And Pretty proud of how solid this thing's turning out. Now that this part is done, we're ready to attach our top and then start installing our hardware for our leaf. And then we'll do the drawers again the next video. So we're gonna not glue the top down, that way we can take it off. That way if your doors are narrow, you can maybe squeeze this guy through. Again, measure your doorways before you try to tackle this project. This project right here, at its very narrowest, is 24.5 inches wide. So if your doorway is less than 24 inches to get into your craft room, you need to amend these measurements. But most interior doorways are about 28 inches. That's why the top can be added separately and it's a separate unit. That way you can roll it in place, put the top on, get it positioned, and then you're good to go. Now I'm ready to pre-drill for my top. And I'm going to get it positioned and laid out, and then I will take it back off and then start building out my wing. So you don't really have to measure this out, but you want to make sure your holes are where you can get to them. So I'm going to start right here, and I'm just going to do 3 in the front and 3 in the back. And now I don't want any sawdust or anything like that getting in the way of the top. I want it to sit on here as flatly as possible. So I'm actually going to countersink this from the top and the bottom. So just a little countersink on top will give me kind of a dust channel. And then I'll come in from the bottom and make sure it's countersunk deep enough for the screw. There we go. Okay, now I'm ready to set the top on here. I've got everything pre-drilled. I blew it off, cleaned it off good. I even spot sanded to make sure it was smooth. Make sure my clean side of the plywood is up if there is a good side or a bad side. And you can see that it overhangs nicely on all 4 sides. So now it's just a matter of measuring and marking. So I'm at about 1.5 inches there. 2 inches there, so I need to go this way a little bit. So I'm about 1.5 inches. 2 inches, so I need to be at 1 3/4 inches. There we go. 1 3/4 overhang. 1 3/4 overhang. Now, in the plans, you can build it just like this, and then it'll stay just like this. But in a follow-up video, a companion video of this, I'm going to show you how to trim out the edges of this just to make it look a little bit nicer and fancier. That's what I'm going to do, so I'm going to account for that as I do this overhang. Alright, let me bring you in here close so you can see what I'm doing. You can see my line right there. I need to make sure that gets aligned like that. And then if I come over here, you can see those lines have pretty much already lined up. Make sure they're aligned like that. And now I can just start screwing it in from underneath, and I'm going to make sure I use my 1 1/4 screws to screw this down. If I use the longer 1 5/8 screws, they'll go through the top and poke a hole, and we definitely don't want that. Stop recording. Alright, so again, everything for this project is easily available at your box store. So here is our piano hinge. This is a 30-inch piano hinge, and that's what we're going to use to connect our drop leaf. Okay, so now that's 30 inches. Our top is 42. So if I take off 6 inches on this side, and if I take off 6 inches on this side, that should fit perfectly, and it does. Okay, so I'm going to scoot this a little bit apart, and then I'm going to extend my line with my square. Now I have my other line. There we go. Okay, now if I butt this up to here, make sure it's nice and even, I can just make my V-notch right there and right there. So that's what I want right there. Now I've got to attach it. So what I'm going to do is you take it and bend it into the shape of a 90 and just kind of nest it onto your workpiece. I'm going to start with the actual top right here. It just kind of sits there nice and easy. So while I'm going to attach that, I'm going to go ahead and get my wing out of the way. And what I have here, again, you can get these at your box store, is a self-centering bit. So whenever I hold this on my line, set it into my screw hole, it's going to center it for me. That way my hole's perfectly centered, that way I can keep it aligned. Again, you don't have to have this to build this project, but it's one of those tools that just makes life a little bit easier. Let me pop out the screws, and it's very important on these are very small screws. Very, very small screws that will strip out very easily. So we need to turn our drill's chuck way down and just ease those screws in. There we go. That's perfect right there. So I've got this side, and now I'm going to come over here and get this other side. Again, I'm going to put my self-centering bit back in. And then I'm going to pop a screw in here. Now, what I've done is, now that I've bent this into a 90, I'm keeping it pressed firm against the edge of my workpiece, of my board, so that it doesn't move and it doesn't bow or twist or anything. I got that. And then I'm going to go ahead and do approximately the middle right here. Okay. And I think once I do the middle, I can just go ahead and drill everything out all at once and then put in the rest of my screws. I've got my little pencil marks for where the wing should line up, and pretty much just making sure it's flush. I want this to be touching because I want it to be tight when it's closed. So I have that right there, and now I'm going to do just one screw on this end, and then I'll go over to the other side and do a screw on that side. There we go. I've got it nice and tight. Everything's pushed together. I'm going to drill out my hole. There we go. And now I'm going to go ahead and drive that screw. But again, make sure we're pushed together. Make sure everything's where it is. Because the screw will pull it into place, but we don't want it to have to. There we go. So I have that now. And now I'm going to walk over to this other side. So I'm going to push it together where there's no gap. And then I'm going to drive my screw into this side. Okay, that should have it. So now we're flush on the other side. I can feel that it's flush. It's what we want. We want it to be nice and tight when everything's closed up. Now I'm going to aim for, I did the middle last time, I'll aim for like a quarter of the way. And I'll go ahead and drill that. And then I'll run a screw into there. And then I'll go, about the 3/4 of the way. Right there. There we go. Okay. So now that this is done, you can see it hinges nicely. It's what we want. Everything's joined up nice and tight. Now I'm going to put the rest of my screws in. Alright, so now we're ready to attach our wings. So the hinge needs to go to the inside. Like that, I think. So this needs to go right here as well on the inside. Now I'm running into an issue as well. If you look right here, you can see this is going to interfere with that. But if I clear it, then this is going to want to sag about 1/8 of an inch. Don't worry, I've come up with a solution to that will help you get your tabletop level. And it's super easy and only requires hot glue to do. My biggest concern is making sure these guys don't bump each other and they're even. So I think having those about 1 inch apart is good. And then looks like about 2.5 inches there and a little over 2.5 inches there. So I'm just going to call it 2.5 inches in for each of these. So let me go ahead and put a pencil mark there at 2.5, and then at 2.5, and then we'll extend that line one way or another. Here's how we extend that line with our handy dandy framing square. So I'm going to line up my framing square, and I'm just squaring off the top now. Remember, we're upside down. Extend that line all the way up. Same thing on the other side. Using our framing square, set it on there, and then we'll just extend our line all the way up. Okay. So math is hard. So if I take off 3/4, split 3/4 is 3/8, minus a half plus 3/8, so 7/8 of an inch. Is that right? I don't know. So I'm going to mark 7/8 of an inch. I'm going to mark 7/8 of an inch right there. How we do? Perfect. Okay. So that's going to go right there. I'm going to extend my line so it's nice and easy to see. Pencil lines sand off, so don't feel worried about marking what you need to mark. I almost messed up. I know, shocking, right? I would never, ever mess up. I'm a professional. So instead of folding it like that, I actually need this one to be flush with the edge. So how can I do that? Here's what I can do. I can use this piece right here to act as my brace. So I can do that right there. And then when I pre-drill it, those pre-drilled holes will be where I need them to be. So that's exactly what I'm going to do right there. Okay, so right now I'm going to make sure that it's flush. And then I'm going to drill out my first hole, holding it down so that moving isn't a big deal. There we go. I've got my screw location. That's good. Okay, so I'm actually going to go ahead and screw that one down permanently. Well, permanently until I take it apart to paint it. Now make sure our clutch is turned way down on our drill. There we go. There we go. Okay, I like that. That's where it needs to be. Now again, using this as our brace, we're going to make sure that's pushed up against where it needs to be, holding it in place, trying not to move, trying not to drop everything. And I forgot to switch over to my drill, so we'll just do it again. There we go. Holding still. not moving. If ever you need to hold something perfectly still, you got to make sure to know how to hold your tongue so it doesn't move, okay? Alright, so now do that one. There we go. I like it. Okay. Yep, so that's going to go here and then hinge in place. Okay, that's good. So what I'm doing now is I'm attaching this. But if I just leave it flush with everything, it's going to hit this hinge right here. Now, if I wanted to get fancy, I could have created a rebate where it was smooth and flush and solve this problem. But again, I'm trying to make this quote-unquote accessible for everybody. So we're going to solve this problem. I've just got some shims, some playing cards will work. And all I'm doing is I'm going to build my shim up where it is above flush with this, and these 3 will work. It's just nice and barely above it. So now I'm gonna set everything on that and line it up. There we go. Alright, so that's where that needs to be. And I've already made sure my pencil line is square, and you can see maybe that my plywood edge stops right there. That's going to be important later because I'm going to show you in a different video how to trim this out to make it pretty. Alright, so we have the bottom. Now I'm going to do the top and then make sure it clears. If it rubs a little bit, that'll be fine. So that's where I need it to be. Sorry if I'm blocking your view. There we go. Okay. So now I'm going to move my extra shims out of the way because I want to use my same shims again to make sure that I'm keeping everything how it needs to be. And see, those are kind of wedged under there, which is exactly what I need it to be. Yeah, and it rubs just slightly on that hinge, and as it sags due to gravity right now, it won't open, but with gravity, it opens up just fine. So what'll be the right thing to do is probably put like a little knob on here, so whenever gravity's working with you, because see, this has got a little bit of play in it, which is fine. We want just a little bit of play in things like that. And the way this is done with this hinge like this, notice it stops at 90 degrees. And this is partly for load transfer, is that way the force of this table is pushing directly into this, and so this hinge really is only stressed whenever it's closed with no weight on it and then in motion. But once it's open all the way, all the stress is onto the wood, keeping it from pulling out, which is what we want it to be. Now we have a problem. Now we need to have it where this opens up, and then whenever it's right side up, it doesn't sag. But see, right now it's going to sag a little bit. So how do we make it not do that? Shims. That's how we're going to do this. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to wedge this in here, like that. However, if we do it from this side, it won't close. So what we're going to do is we're going to get this thing and use our table, because we know it's flat right now, because that's what it's resting against. And we're going to go ahead and wedge this nice and tight. Make sure it's open all the way. Make sure it's nice and tight. And you can see that with the tension on the hinge, it's actually using almost that entire shim. So I want to make sure it's opened at 90 degrees and pushed in pretty darn tight. And what we've just created is a self-adjusting hinge. By having it tighter than it needs to be, when you level it up, that will naturally kind of wedge itself into place. I originally thought of hot gluing it, but instead I'm actually going to screw it on here with no glue or anything like that, so that if we ever need to adjust this in the future, we can. I am going to pre-drill this and be careful not to go all the way through my top, because if I do, I can split this pine. There we go. So I've got a screw right there, and then I'll do a screw on this other side. Now I'm going to come back with my countersink. To attach this, I'm just using some 3/4 inch wood screws. I'll make sure they're on the list as well. I'm just going to drive that in, and then drive it in. Now you're going to see it overhangs right here, but that's not a huge issue because it's just screwed down and not, you know, permanently attached. I know, okay, I want to cut that about right there, and I can just pull it off and cut it with a handsaw, or with shims. One thing you can do is just score it repeatedly with your, you know, utility knife. Be able to break it. Yep. See, I was able to break it off, and then I can just kind of keep working through the rest of those little fibers. There we go. So see, I've cut all the way through it with just a utility knife right there, which is nice and safe. Alright, so we're good there. Just when we flip this over, we should have it nice and even. Now it's time to add our casters, and this is how you can adjust the height of your workbench pretty easy. Again, I made this to be 32 inches finished height for my wife, and I'm using these 3-inch casters. If you use 4-inch casters, the way the hardware and everything works out, that gives you about 5 inches of lift. With 3-inch casters, you get about 3 inches of lift, so it'll scale up. So if you wanted it 32.5 inches, I have this scrap 1/2-inch plywood from our cut list. I can screw that in right there, get an extra 1/2 inch. If I wanted to go up another inch, you can go up another inch. If I wanted to go up 2 inches, I could do that and add a bigger caster. If I wanted to go up 3/4 of an inch, I could use the 3/4 inch plywood. So you can fine tune the height on this to be how you need it to be. And I'm just lining it up with the edge of my plywood side right here and in with the edge. So whenever this is pivoted out like this, actually I'm going to put a little bit closer to the edge here so that I can access the foot pedal. See how I can access the foot all the way around. That's what you want. You want to be able to access this lock from as many places as possible. And we're going to use 4 full locking casters. I have found in my workshop these work really good. They're not the absolute prettiest out there, but if you didn't want any visible casters, you could put 2 locking casters on like the work side and then 2 regular swivel castles on this side, and then trim it out where you didn't see it, but then it would only lock, you know, right there. So that is a possibility that I'm not going to show you. You'll have to just understand what I said and figure it out on your own. Alright, that's part of the reason I did this double plate right here, so I have plenty to screw into, and I'm going to use a Craig pocket hole screw to attach this because it has a nice little washer head on it that won't go through. So I'm using this screw right here. It's got this nice little washer head on it and uses a square drive that will, you know, clamp down on that nice and good. So now this is attached. We're going to attach these on all 4 sides. And you can see that's how it locks right there. Gives you a nice sturdy table when all 4 are locked. Most of the time I can get by with just locking 2 of them. And here we go. Here is our work table all done. You can see we still need to add the drawers. I'm going to do that part in a separate video. That way I can focus on just building the drawers with you to show you how to do that. But we have our 3 through cubbies right there for storage. This top portion will be for our drawers, our tray drawers. Of course, you can leave it open if you have a different storage solution that you'd rather do. That's fine. You can just leave it open. It's plenty sturdy. Using that double layer of plywood right there really keeps it from sagging, so this is going to be pretty much as perfectly flat as you can get, so flatter than probably most tables in your house. and then it pivots around. So you can see with just one hand I can easily move this around on my concrete floor. Now I'm going to lock it down. So to stand up the wing, we'll just raise it up like that. Pull that out till it wedges in place. I didn't force it or anything like that. I just lifted it until it felt good. And there we go. This is perfectly smooth. I got a little bit of a drop right here on this edge. That is unfortunate. That we can't really control, but this is nice and flat. So as you set your projector right here, have your cutting mat here, you can really fine tune everything and have a coplanar work surface. That's going to be awesome. I hope you found this tutorial useful. This is going to be part of a 3-part series on this, because these videos are already long tutorials. The next video in the series is going to be building and installing these drawers. The final video is going to be trimming it out to hide some of these plywood edges and really just kind of make it fancy. And that's what we're going to do. But as you can see right here, you have a very useful cutting table or work table right here with plenty of storage, lots of versatility. I'm seeing this could be used as a kitchen island. I'm seeing this would be a really good router table for my workshop. I would adjust the height up a little bit in my shop because, you know, I am taller. But overall, I'm very pleased with how this came out. I'm very happy with how flat everything came out. And now it's just prettying it up, breaking some of these sharp edges with sandpaper so that, you know, nothing gets snagged on this, because this corner right here is pretty sharp. It could snag and potentially rip a fabric or something like that. I know y'all don't want that. So hope you found this video useful. Again, if you haven't purchased the plans for this, you can on both my wife's website, DaileySewsandStuff.com, or my website, therecreationalwoodworker.com, where we help you build great furniture. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.